exists a type of love that never ends, because in truth it never began. It survives on projections, unspoken desires, misunderstood silences. The love you construct more within yourself than in reality. And yet, you insist on calling it real. Perhaps because you need it to be. Because admitting the alternative hurts more than enduring its absence. They taught us that to love is to find the other. But they rarely told us that love is, first and foremost, a mirror of ourselves. The other becomes a stage where we project the unloved child, the unheard longing, the tenderness we never received. And so, we confuse love with fulfillment, with salvation, with reunion. But love isn't this. To love is to host a visitor who speaks another emotional language, to learn to listen to words we don't recognize, to feel frustrated at being misunderstood, and stay anyway. Real love isn't fluent. It stumbles, misses the tone, loses rhythm. And in this stumbling, it reveals its humanity. Nietzsche said idealized love is theater, an attempt to deny the tragic, the imperfect, the unpredictable. But the truth is, to love deeply is an act of courage, because it means accepting the other will never be exactly as we dreamed, and that still they're worth staying for. The greatest pain doesn't come when love ends. It comes when we realize it never truly existed, that we lived inside a fantasy, a hope, a reflection, that the other was never really there. Or they were, but as themselves, not as you wished them to be. So to love is to return to yourself, to stop disappearing into the other, to find a space where you don't need to hide to be accepted, where your emotional language is understood even if with effort. Because worthwhile love isn't what completes you, it's what allows you to be, without forced translation, without imposed silence, without vanishing. The love that exhausts isn't the one that demands presence, it's the one that demands self-obliteration. This starts early. From the cradle, we learn that to be lovable is to be pleasing, that care must be earned by suppressing needs. We grow up with this invisible code, that to love is to mold yourself, to be enough for the other, even when it drains you. But there's a quieter truth. Love is born from the same place we are, vulnerability, the cry for comfort, the gaze seeking belonging, the touch that says, "You're safe here." The child we once were still lives within us. And they don't want grandeur, they want care, they want to be heard, they want presence without judgment. When you love someone, you're not just connecting to the adult, you're meeting the emotional child they carry, the one who was hurt, who learned to hide, who still fears being too much. And when you're loved, the same happens. Your inner child surfaces asking gently or desperately to be accepted as they are. The human brain responds to affection like profound relief, a biological need that blurs into the spiritual, because love at its core is a homecoming, a reunion with something we missed before knowing its name. It's touching another and being touched by what reason cannot explain. And perhaps this is why love exhausts us. It excavates ancient layers, pokes at unresolved wounds, reignites forgotten pains. But in this fatigue, transformation happens. Because only those who love consciously learn. Real love isn't about strength, it's shared fragility. Two humans, trying to care for each other without abandoning themselves. There comes a moment, in nearly every love's beginning, when the other seems perfect. Every word enchants. Every gesture confirms something you'd always wanted to hear. There's magic in the air, a sparkle in the eyes, and a silent relief. I've found someone who understands me, but is it really the other, or just the reflection of an ancient longing? Initial chemistry isn't a mistake. It's the brain's natural impulse, dopamine's invitation to enchantment. But dopamine doesn't see depth, it projects. It constructs an image, not a relationship. And in this image, you often love the idea more than the person, the hope more than the reality. Nietzsche knew this. He said we frequently love not the other, but the image we created of them. An image shaped by our absences, our longings, our desire to finally be seen. And when reality emerges, with flaws, limits, differences, we feel frustration. But the frustration doesn't come from the other. It comes from the shattered illusion. Perhaps then, the most honest question you can ask is, what am I loving? The real person, or my projection of them? What attracts me is who they are, or what they represent for my unresolved emotional history. Am I seeing or just reflecting? Because to love someone is also to disillusion yourself. to remove the lenses of enchantment and still choose to stay, not because the other is perfect, but because they're true, and because in this meeting of truths exists something deeper than passion, rarer than chemistry, something we might finally call love. There's a pain that seems like rupture, but is just change. Love, contrary to popular belief, doesn't die. It changes form. It releases fantasy to reveal reality. It stops seducing and starts teaching. And at this point, many say it's over, but perhaps it has only just truly begun. At first, everything is reflection. You see the other through enchanted eyes and it's beautiful. But with time, the reflection dissipates, and what remains is real. Not what you dreamed, but what exists. Not the ideal, but the human. Not what you expected, but what stands before you with all its limits. Many believe the other changed, but perhaps it was just your gaze that transformed. The veil fell, the image faded, the illusion dissolved, and in place of projection remained a person, with pains, with stories, with inconsistencies. And the question then is, do you still love what you see? Do you miss the person, or the version you created of them? Is the painful absence the other's presence, or your own presence, lost while trying to maintain a love that was never whole? The love that remains after the illusion falls. That's what transforms. Because it doesn't demand perfection, it invites presence. It doesn't feed expectations, it asks for truth. And often, this truth is silent, uncomfortable, but also liberating. Because real love isn't what promises endless enchantment. It's what chooses to stay, even when enchantment passes, even when the mirror breaks, even when all that remains is the chance to see the other and yourself without masks, without filters, without fantasies, just as you are, and still, with tenderness. There's a loneliness born not from silence, but from speech that finds no echo. You try to speak, try to show, try to reveal yourself in small phrases, gestures, confessions, but the other seems to hear on a different frequency, as if speaking a language where your words get lost, your emotions become noise. Every human has an effective vocabulary, a unique way of giving and receiving love. Some touch, others listen. Some give through actions, others through silence. But when these languages don't meet, love becomes failed translation, becomes effort, becomes desperate attempts to be understood where no one learned to listen. You start over-explaining, justifying what you feel, reshaping what you say, and without noticing, you grow quiet. Because speaking without being understood hurts more than staying silent. The love meant to be a bridge becomes monologue, and in this monologue you gradually erase yourself, trying to maintain a bond that's no longer mutual. Perhaps you're living this now, trying to be understood by someone who doesn't know or won't learn your language. And it's okay to recognize this. It's okay to stop trying to translate what, deep down, would only be understood by those who also feel profoundly. Write, if you wish, not for the other, for yourself. Write how you'd like to be loved. Then read it silently and see if this is already happening in your life, or if you're waiting for someone who never knew how to listen. Because love, however complex, begins with true listening. And if it doesn't exist, perhaps neither does love. Sometimes, what seems like love is just a camouflaged plea. You care, offer, wait, turn daily gestures into altars of affection. But underneath, a silent question echoes. Do you love me now? And what seemed like generosity reveals a hunger for approval, an ancient fear of inadequacy disguised as empathy. It's hard to discern the thin line between true love and self-abandonment, because love, when not born from wholeness, becomes effort, becomes adaptation, becomes trying to fit into the other's space, even if it means squeezing yourself smaller, staying quiet, fading away. Nietzsche would say this way of loving is dangerous, because it makes the other the judge of your worth, and when this happens, love becomes tribunal. Every gesture becomes evidence, every silence, a verdict, your existence, a sentence to be served, always trying to earn your place. The shadow doesn't want to sabotage your love, it wants to reveal what's hidden within it, and perhaps what's hidden is precisely this: the desperate need to be seen, validated, accepted. But love that demands self-renunciation to exist isn't love. It's negotiation. It's conditioning. It's fear. Look honestly, are you loving or just trying not to be rejected? Are you offering yourself or pleading with yourself? Because the answer changes everything, changes the relationship, changes the exhaustion, changes the meaning of continuing. Because love is only whole when it doesn't charge your essence as payment, when it doesn't demand your absence as proof of devotion, when it lets you stay without needing to disappear. There's an invisible script many follow unknowingly, inherited from movies, tales, beliefs, traumas. It says to love is to find someone, merge, belong, yield. That love is forever, must be exclusive, needs pain to have value. But this love, so romanticized, is also a prison. Nietzsche said love is a state of war, not against the other but within yourself. Because to truly love disrupts, topples the ego, exposes wounds, forces you to see yourself, stripped of armor, poses, roles, and this terrifies. So many prefer the script's comfort. Monogamy, possession, control disguised as care, silence disguised as respect, renunciation disguised as proof, domesticated love, taught love, obedient love, repetitive love. But is it really love? Have you ever asked what you truly believe about love? Questioned whether what you feel is yours or learned? Pause to feel if the love you live expands you or diminishes you. Because sometimes you're not loving, you're performing, adjusting to an idea that didn't originate in you, but was told to be right. And the soul knows. It sickens when affection isn't genuine, when bonds are contracts, when passion is ritual, when connection is rule. Love, when alive, doesn't fit fixed forms. It breathes, it changes, it challenges, and it only flourishes when you dare ask, is this love mine? Or was it programmed into me? Because the answer, whatever it is already freedom, already truth, already the beginning of something that can finally be yours. There's subtle beauty in being with someone without trying to possess, without wanting to transform, without needing to convince. To love this way is soul hospitality, making inner space for the other to dwell, however briefly, without demanding permanence, without charging molds. Renato Nogueira calls this loving diplomacy, the art of relating without colonizing, loving without invading, being together without stealing the other's individuality. Because love that pressures, suffocates. What tries to merge, dissolves. What demands fusion, destroys both contours. You don't need to disappear to be loved, nor lose yourself in the other to prove you love. True meeting happens when two whole beings choose closeness, without getting lost. When silences are shared like temples, not threats. Try the symbolic experiment of silence. Sit with your loved one for 5 minutes. No words, no distractions, just presence. Observe what emerges, because sometimes what sustains love isn't what's said, it's what's allowed to be felt in the space between words. To love isn't to become an extension, it's to remain territory. To say, I'm here, and you're there, and still, we can touch. This sacred distance where no one needs to shrink to fit the other's world is where love stops being prison and becomes shared freedom. Not all love ends with shouting. Some end in silence. A silence that grows gradually, filling spaces once occupied by affection, laughter, presence. A silence heavier than any fight, because there's nothing left to dispute. Only absence remains. There's a loneliness more painful than solitude, accompanied loneliness. Felt lying beside someone who no longer sees you. That grows each time you pretend all's well, while shrinking inside, and realize, sadly, that what was once home has become a maze. Real love shelters. Even in conflicts, there's care. Even in differences, desire to build. But when this shelter disappears, when you no longer feel at home, perhaps it's time to leave, not as escape, but as reconnection with your own truth. If you don't feel at home, perhaps it's time to move. This isn't an invitation to quit. It's a call to lucidity, to recognizing that staying where there's no reciprocity is subtle self-abandonment. Leaving isn't failure, it's emotional maturity. Acknowledging that love's end can also be a return, not to the past but to yourself, to who you were before molding yourself, to who you dream of being without hiding, because true home was never a person. It was always where you could be whole, and if this place no longer exists with the other, perhaps it's time to rebuild it within yourself, even if it means leaving, even if it requires courage, even if it hurts, because sometimes The pain of departure is the first step toward peace. There's a fundamental difference between enchantment and love. Passion seduces, envelops, masks. It's sweet fever, promise, vertigo. But when heat fades, when reflections shatter, when idealization weakens, what remains is truth. And here, love begins, or ends. Because to love isn't to remain enchanted, it's to stay present even when the other reveals their shadows, to choose to gaze tenderly at what isn't beautiful, at what challenges, at what frustrates. Nietzsche saw love as raw force, making us face not just the other, but ourselves. True love isn't comfortable. It removes masks, returns mirrors, demands emotional responsibility. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "To love is to be present for the other's suffering, not as martyr, but as human, as one who knows the deepest affection isn't what tries to fix, but what remains, that welcomes, that listens, that stays, to gaze lovingly, without demanding return, to feel deeply, without dramatizing, to stand beside, without controlling." This isn't weakness, it's courage. The courage to love without guarantees, to feel without armor, to remain, even when passion unravels. Because what lasts, when all else goes, is the love that dared to see, and still chose to stay. In the end, perhaps to love is simply the continuous effort to translate a language no one fully masters. Yours, the others, times. And to accept tenderly that the right words won't always come, that harmony won't always be perfect, that sometimes there will be static, and still there will be love. Because worthwhile love isn't what never errs, it's what insists on listening, what refuses to stop understanding, what remains present, even when translation fails, even when communication falters, even when all you can offer is silence and presence. You wouldn't click on a video about love if you weren't trying to understand yours. And this alone is lucidity, is care, is proof that despite everything, your heart still lives, still wants, still feels, and this is enough. Welcome your inner language, even if it's still developing, even if it seems confused, even if no one immediately understands it, and never accept living where your emotional tongue is treated as noise, because you deserve to be heard, deserve to be understood, deserve to be loved, exactly as you are. Don't seek perfection, seek willingness, to feel, to show yourself, to listen, to continue, because ultimately, liberating love isn't what enchants, it's what translates, without rush, without force, without literal translation, but with truth, with care, with soul.